the day. Welcome to Mindful Live 83. It is the 27th of May, very close to Indian Arrival Day, when the Indians arrived in our country. Well, at least when it was celebrated. Grand. Welcome. I am your host, Nathan Springer. Thank you for being here. It's much appreciated. I am running live right now over on TikTok, on Instagram, and on YouTube. If you are viewing the live over on TikTok or on Instagram, make sure you're hitting that like button on YouTube also. But if you are on any of the other streamers, make sure you head over to YouTube at some time and subscribe to my channel, Nathan Springer, over there. And let's get into the topic of the day. Okay, as I was previously outlining, someone asked me something interesting yesterday about my thoughts on the mass shooting, the school shooting that happened over in the United States, and real tragedy, horrific stuff, really bad. But what is my opinion? How do I see it? Well, I did a contemplation for today that hasn't yet been released. I'm still editing it, but I said let me make sure I'm out here with the live on, not on time, but in time. In time. And the contemplation I did, I'll be releasing that probably in the morning or something like that, or later tonight, who knows. The idea was about the drug trade in Trinidad and Tobago. So, as it is widely said that the vast majority of crime in Trinidad and Tobago is caused by the drug trade and by gang activity. What the drug trade is and what the gangs do. And the reality is a lot of what the gangs do is because of the drug trade too. So really and truly, a lot of the crime, full stop, is because of drugs. That's it. Drugs and the drug trade. That's crime. But drugs are illegal. Drugs are against the law. How is that a problem in our country if we made drugs illegal? If we knew that drugs are a problem all around the world, we made drugs illegal. We said you cannot have drugs in Trinidad and Tobago. So how are there still drugs in the country? How is drugs still a problem? Well, because laws don't actually stop people from doing things. Laws don't work like that. Laws to me, when you hear laws, the idea of this is to concretize, to make more permanent the view of the society, the view that the society already generally holds. The law has to be a mirror of the views that is already embedded in the culture inside of the society. If these views are not embedded already inside of the society, then it isn't going to make sense. No one is going to follow the laws. The laws are a mirror of those actions of the society. So, if the society does not have a certain kind of ideal, then creating a law doesn't change the way of the society. It just makes certain things a little more difficult. So, yes, drugs are illegal, but making drugs illegal doesn't stop people from wanting to use drugs. That's the thing. Since humans have been humaning, drugs seem to have been a pretty regular part of the human experience and the human existence. And it seems very difficult to get it out of people's hands. People enjoy the drug use a lot. They do. Making it illegal does not decrease the demand. That's a problem. Because on the flip side of it being illegal and you're not being able to decrease the demand, there's on the other side the production. Because if I want a drug, someone has to produce it, unless I could produce it myself. The common drugs, marijuana, cocaine, heroin, etc., etc. Well, in Trinidad it's pretty much marijuana and cocaine. Those drugs are not that difficult to produce. The world is a large place. Someone somewhere in the world is always going to be producing some one of the drugs. Once there's the demand for it, someone is going to be producing it. If the demand exists as it does and it keeps going up, someone at some point in time is going to be like wheat. So there are billions of people that want this grass. All hi Vanessa Barrel over there on the YouTube. Nice to see you over there. There's this grass that billions of people want. They're willing to pay quite a lot of money for it. All I need to do is grow it and sell it. Well, I'll grow it. So you cannot stop the production of the drugs. You cannot decrease the demand. Those are the the start points and the end points. You have no control over the start point. You don't really have any control over the end point. At least making it illegal does not control that demand end point. So all you can do, and all police really do, is interfere with the supply chain in between. They lock up somebody here, they lock up somebody there, they hold a pusher here, they follow this pusher right up to get his big supplier, and they lock up this whole supply chain, this whole ring of drug traffickers in this country. All 60, 70, 80, 100 of them go behind bars. But anyway you take it, the demand for the drug remains there, and the original production, wherever it's being produced, remains there. So even if you lock up all the entire supply chain, what that's going to do is create a massive vacuum in between the producers and the consumers who are demanding it. If you cannot stop the production, you cannot lower the demand. Now there's a massive vacuum to get this thing from the producer to the consumer. And this vacuum is at the tone. There's a website that literally tracks the amount of money spent in illegal drugs per year so far. And worldometer spending on illegal drugs. Let me pull that up on the YouTube there for those of you looking over there. And it's just continually going up. Spending on illegal drugs this year, 161 billion, 11 million, 680, 90, 700,000 and counting. 161 billion. It's me. 161 billion already spent in illegal drugs for the year. So if that's the kind of demand we're talking about, and there is someone willing to produce it, the kind of vacuum you're creating if you take the entire supply chain out is telling me, if I could go in there and supply all of this product to all of those that demand it, there's 161 billion in 5 months sitting there for the taking. That's the kind of money that would tempt just about every person on earth. With that kind of money, there's always going to be someone coming in to fill the supply chain vacuum. If our aim, as we see, is to decrease the amount of people using drugs, catching the suppliers, those in the supply chain, the traffickers, the dealers, does nothing to that. How many dealers have you ever heard? Us here living in Trinidad and Tobago, anyone else living anywhere else in the world listening to this live or this on repeat on YouTube right now? Make sure you hit that like button, drop a comment if you have something to say. Make sure you're subscribed also. Yes, anyone, anyway, have you ever heard of a drug addict, a piper, a spranger, an addict? Have you ever heard of any addict anywhere in the world coming off of drugs, being forced to come off of drugs because they couldn't find it anyway? I have never heard of that. I've heard they don't have the money. I've heard them arrested and put into rehab. I've heard the family talking to them. I've heard religious experiences. I've heard them trying to change their lives because of a child they've had or something like that. I've never heard the reason for coming off of drugs being, I couldn't find it anywhere anymore, because it never happens. As long as there's the demand, there's going to be too much money in the business, so they cannot escape. Listen, the amount of money that is in the illegal drug trade there is enough to buy many developing and underdeveloped nations. It is being said that a lot of the coups we see right now in Central and Western African countries are directly linked to the drug trade, because some of these countries, the entire country is becoming a narco state. Now, this isn't something very strange to the Caribbean. It isn't something very far from the Caribbean. I don't know how many of you have paid attention to what happened recently in the British Virgin Islands. Their premier, their version of their prime minister, was held on some legit movie level drug trafficking attempts in the United States. And he's claiming immunity. There's a recent article from this. Let me dive over to that recent article and we'll see what he says on that. Embattled BVI Premier claims immunity from prosecution. Sky News has reported that the Premier of the British Virgin Islands has demanded his immediate release. From U.S. custody, claiming he is immune from prosecution and drug trafficking charges. According to the British news organization, Andrew Fahey has said he cannot be tried for his alleged crimes because he's an elected constitutional head of government of the British Overseas Territories. BVI News, for its part, reported that a representative of the United States District Court, Southern District of Florida, confirmed with its news team that Fahey filed a notice of invocation of immunity at federal court in Miami. Last week, U.S. law enforcement officials arrested Fahey, or Fahey, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, in a sting operation as he was about to board a private jet in Miami. A criminal complaint said the BVI Premier and the territory's director of ports, Oleanvin Maynard, were meeting undercover United States Drug Enforcement Administration agents posing as drug traffickers. One day after Fahey's arrest, BVI Governor John Rankin effected the early release of January 2021 Commission of Inquiry report into the territory's governance. Rankin disclosed that the report found millions were spent on useless or abandoned projects, some linked to allies of the BVI Premier. So this Premier, basically the Prime Minister of the British Virgin Islands, was out there organizing wholesale private jet drug deals with drug traffickers who are actually drug enforcement agents posing as drug traffickers. A movie could be made about this. I'm just saying this could make a movie. And that's the problem there. The amount, it's just the amount. The sheer amount of money involved in the drug trade is nearly too much to resist. Well, it is literally too much to resist. Furthermore, dictatorships that are somewhat shut out from the world tend to turn to manufacturing and selling drugs to support the state. North Korea and Afghanistan comes to mind. That is very true and a very good point, Massimo, that the dictatorships all around the world often do sell drugs. They make a lot of money selling drugs. That's the thing. It's so much money. It's so much money. How would you just allow this money to pass through your hands? And it's so tempting. Even the Premier of the British Virgin Islands, right in our Caribbean right here, has been tempted so much that he was caught red-handed. It's just so much money. Too much to resist, it would seem. And if that is the case, the solution for stopping the violence in the drug trade, how could that be making it illegal? If it is that we cannot stop the production, we cannot stop the demand, and when we interfere with the in-between, all that happens is, so we arrest this cartel, we arrest this entire drug trafficking ring. What that means is everyone who they used to sell to for some time, every person that they used to sell to, now they are there waiting for a new supplier. And whoever that person's competition was, now they're going to swallow up the market. So, for example, a prime example of this is over in Mexico. For some time, Mexico had, I believe in the 20s, quite a few cartels, numerous cartels distributed all through Mexico and all through South America, in fact. And now I believe Mexico has wilted down to, or actually has amalgamated into like 3 or 4 large, humongous cartels. Because as the drug agencies, as the police, as the law enforcement go in there and they take down an entire drug trafficking ring, all that happens is the competition, whoever the competition was for that specific business area in the drug trafficking world, whoever that competition was, says, yes, the police have done my job for me, and now that entire market is open for my use, and I am going to go in there. And what is happening? You remove it from having 20 small cartels, 20 small gangs, to just one massive gang that has a lot more power now. And then, further than that, because you keep interfering with the supply chain, because in order to interfere with the supply chain, you have to break the trust inside of tight-knit organizations such as gangs. Because of that, what you are doing is you're making everyone inside of the gang, everyone inside of the drug trade, extremely, extremely paranoid. Everyone inside. What is the root cause? Poverty. I disagree. Nothing with that has to do with poverty. The driving factor of the drug trade isn't that people are so poor that the only way they can get money is through selling drugs. That's a lie. The driving factor is just that people like money. Humans like money. That's just the reality. Simple as that. Humans like money. There's a lot of money in the drug trade. So because of that, it's just too tempting for some people to resist. A lot of the people driving the drug trade aren't poor people struggling in the slums of some lower class neighborhood. No. A lot of the people, the vast majority of the people driving the drug trade in terms of shipping things to and fro are the wealthiest people. The poor people cannot get a shipment to come from Mexico or Colombia or wherever else. That's not poverty. It's money and greed. But yes, because the law enforcement continually interrupts the supply chain, interrupts that supply flow, what happens is everyone involved has to become paranoid. There's no other choice. You must be paranoid, otherwise you wouldn't survive in this market. The only survivors in the drug trade are those that are the most paranoid. The most paranoid wins in the end. And everyone becomes paranoid. And what does this paranoia do in turn? This paranoia leads to violence. Because we're talking about 160 billion in 5 months industry. That's a lot of money. And we're talking about an industry. When you make a mistake, you end up in jail and you lose all your money. So the stakes are extremely high. I make millions of dollars or my life is ruined and I go to jail. If those are the stakes, anyone coming in between that attempting to change me from a millionaire to a jailbird, I am willing to kill them. And the higher the stakes on the jailbird side, the more willing I'll be to kill anyone that wants to come in between there. So really and truly, by making this trade so illegal and enforcing so many drug crimes so strictly, we are in fact increasing the violence inside of the trade. It could sound counterintuitive, but to me, logically, it seems like the laws intended to help protect us from drugs, actually, from drugs and the crimes and the violence associated with drugs, actually increases the violence and makes the drug use more problematic. Now, there were, I believe, over in Portugal, I don't think they legalized. They didn't reach that far. I believe they decriminalized a whole slew of drugs, cocaine included. Some of the scary ones, they decriminalized it. And there was a very interesting thing they noted. Now, it didn't necessarily decrease the amount of drug use on a totality. The amount of people using drugs remained about the same, but that's neither here nor there. The amount of people using drugs remained the same whether it was legal or not. I am not sure about that estimate. But what actually did happen in Portugal is the amount of problematic drug use that occurred significantly decreased. Do you think wide-scale decriminalization, excluding manufacturing processes and selling, would be beneficial with more state funds being released for rehabilitation and reskilling tooling? Yes. The problematic drug use decreased because really and truly, a lot of the problems with drug use is the problematic drug use. If someone pops some Molly or whatever they pop, and they go in a field and spin and dance and look at 5 million stars and feel nice, in and of itself, that's not a bother to society. You don't want that person damaging themselves, and you don't want that person degrading general society by damaging their family structure, etc., etc., etc. So the problematic use is the main problem. And what they have realized from what happened over in Portugal is the problematic use increases when the drugs are illegal. Strange enough. And that actually makes sense, because if it is illegal and I'm a user, I have to hide and use. And if it is illegal and I'm a user, I am not getting something with a label telling me how strong this is and how much is in the dose. It might be laced with all kind of little lengtheners and strengtheners to attempt to make more profit for whoever the dealer is. And therefore, the amount of overdose, the amount of bad dose, the amount of problematic usage may increase when it's illegal. And we see there that in the reality of something that we don't want being illegal, banning it, forbidding anyone from having it, doesn't actually bring about the conclusion, the result that we say that we want. Now, I head over to the shooting in the school over in the United States. And there was a reason I went through that drug argument from Trinidad and Tobago's perspective first. Because I think that's easier to understand as a Trinbagonian. Now, I think if we transpose that argument, you could actually understand part of the arguments that some people over in the United States make in regards to the gun violence issues. The United States has a Second Amendment that is there to ensure that every person inside of the United States has a right to own a firearm. It's the purpose of it, if you read their Second Amendment, is not for hunting. The purpose of it is for self-defense, for hunting, and to make sure that no tyrannical government takes over. Now, you have to understand history when it comes to that, because the United States was formed because they believed the tyrannical English government, the king over there, was a King George back then, was tyrannical over them living quite over there in the United States, and they decided, we aren't going to take your tyrannical rule, we're going to take our guns, and when you come here we're going to say goodbye. We are free people now. W is a free elf. And the idea there is your freedom is yours as long as you are able to protect your freedom, and to protect it not only from criminals, not only from a wild boar, but also protect it from if the government decides to go berserk. That's part of the reason there are more guns in the United States than people. That's part of the reason it would be nearly impossible for any country to truly take over the continental United States. There are just too many guns. You could talk about, okay, a government has fighter jets and fighter planes, etc., and nuclear bombs. Yes, if you were talking about annihilating the entirety of the United States, you'd be able to do that. Anyone would be able to do that pretty easily. But, well, not anyone. But that's much easier to do. But if you're talking about taking over a country, which is generally what most people want to do to most places, they don't want to annihilate an entire place unless you're kind of really off the deep end. They generally want to take over. The fact that everyone in the place owns a gun makes it very hard to do. Right, that's a bit of the context there. Now, the issue with that is many people say that that kind of law, that kind of permissiveness inside of their society makes guns too easy to access for everyone, especially assault rifles, as they like to call them, the battlefield weapons meant for the battlefield. Not meant for civilians. Now, bear in mind, AR does not mean assault rifle. AR, I believe, means Armalite rifle, which is the company that made the rifle. Assault rifle speaks about a specific kind of gun. I don't know how many of you played some of those, especially the older shooters had a lot of it with the selective fire. You could change between bursts, you could change between semi-automatic, you could change between automatic. Yeah, that kind of switch where so you could select the kind of fire. That's an assault rifle. An AR is not actually an assault rifle. It's a semi-automatic rifle. It's just like those regular guns they put in, and each time you pull the trigger once, one bullet comes out. That's the kind of gun they use. The difference is it's a rifle, so you know you could lock it on your arm and hold it a bit longer, whatever. Anyway, so one side generally says that we need, or they need, laws to stop this from happening. Ban the guns from getting into these people's hands. While the other side says you cannot ban the guns are our right, and banning the guns don't work. First up, I think the issues they have do not stem from the guns. The United States, many people make it seem like some of these sophisticated guns only just came about. That's not true. There were Tommy guns, machine guns since the 1800s. When the United States first had their Second Amendment, there were private people, regular Harrys, regular guy living just like a regular guy who had their own frigates. A frigate is a warship, right? Loaded with multiple cannons, with multiple different kinds of shots. They could have rolled up on your coastal town and bombarded your entire coastal town, and a private person could have owned such a weapon. That was a weapon of war. Now, whether there were guns like that or not, generally speaking, people didn't go into schools and began shooting up people just so until predominantly the last 10 or so years. If you look at that, you recognize the problem there isn't the tool. The problem there is what is causing people to do this. There's something that is obviously causing a lot of youths to go out there and decide that the best way for me to go out, or the best thing for me to do, is to kill a bunch of my compatriots. And if you go back to some of the first school shootings that became popular, those two guys that were in, what was the name of that early one? The two guys that went out and did one of the really early ones, I think that could have been the 90s. You read what they said. To me, you'd understand a lot of what comes out of it. You could look at nearly every single one of these mass school shooters and the general type of the person, you could guess who the person is going to be. Single mother. The father is not in their life. Very often abused. Very often atomized. Doesn't have a lot of friends. An outcast. These are things that have become more and more significant societal problems as the world has progressed. These are modern problems that have been created due to the modern world that we have created too. And in as such, the problem isn't the gun they are using to carry it out. The problem is that somehow the way you are raising these young men is not conducive to their mental health. And the next part that nearly every single one of them have in common is their mental illness. They have mental illnesses, and almost all of them are medicated. They are some bunch of pharmaceuticals. They medicate their young boys to an insane amount also. So you have these medicated, mentally ill, distant, atomized, outcast, without a father figure in their life boys. And they're a ticking time bomb. And you could remove all the guns and they may get machetes. They may get vehicles. They may get bombs. They will get something else. Because obviously, they have a rage inside them they want to get out. And beside them having that rage because of all the other factors, it seems obvious that this specific technique has become something of a fad. If I am angry with my school, I am angry with the society that is surrounding me right now in the United States, the fad is that I'll pick up a gun and run into a school, because I know that is the thing that is going to get me the most attention. And a lot of the times that's what these people are looking for too. They're looking for the attention, and many people are just so willing to give it to them. The news would call their name and read their writings for weeks to come. Their name would be immortalized. Some sick young lady will propose to them while they are in prison. They will be getting fan mail. It's sick, and they are aware of this. Listen, if all of these school shooters, as soon as they did it, their name and pictures disappeared, You heard about the tragedy, you heard about the victims, but you heard nothing referred to about the shooter. Nothing. Not a name, not a reference, not a gender, not their height, not their skin color, not their motives. Nothing is referred to about them. I think that alone would decrease it. The United States obviously has a celebrity culture, a clout-chasing celebrity culture. If you look at their rappers, a lot of their rappers were murdered during the 2010s to 2020s, that period of time. There were a lot of rappers murdered off of that clout-chasing celebrity style. There's that trend in their society. Bear in mind, the United States is 320 million people. If you could get popular among the United States society, you are really, really, really popular. Popularity among 320 million people has the specter also of gaining a lot of wealth. If you get $1 each from 320 million people, you have a lot of money, 320 million to be precise. So I think it is much more of a cultural issue that they have. Now, on the flip side, the thing is, even with the cultural issue, if it is that banning guns would actually help, then it would make sense too. Even with the cultural issue, that might make sense. That, okay, all right, we understand the culture is degrading, but as the culture degrades, do you want these people in this degrading culture to have access to these powerful weapons? But here's the problem. How do you stop them from getting access to these weapons? That's the very problem I was speaking about as we spoke about the war on drugs that the entire world seems to be fascinated on. Trinidad and Tobago firearms are by and large illegal. The vast majority of murders are committed with firearms. Many of the shooters, ammunition is also illegal in Trinidad and Tobago for the most part. Many of the murders, they're shooting these men 20 plus times. They obviously have no concern for the price of ammunition or accessing it. They could easily get it, obviously. So, would that even help? Can you ban guns? So regularly the discussion in the United States, they flip over from one side to the next. One side saying, if you can ban these weapons, they would save the lives. Then these people will not be able to access it. Okay. But if they are willing to murder people, that's breaking the law. And you tell them it's against the law for them to get the gun. Would they be interested in keeping the law either way? They're going to murder people. You know, murder is against the law too. Do you think they have qualms about breaking the law? No, they don't. Age restrictions, King Matthias says. Okay, at what age? What would be the age restriction? Still 21? And then they would get someone at 21 to buy the gun for them and do the same thing, because that's what regularly happens. Or they would get a gun illegally, as most criminals do either way. And the strange thing is, even on the moral perspective, on the moral side of that with the age restrictions, in the United States they have a draft where 18-year-olds can be drafted into the military and flown 3/4 ways across the world and then be given a gun over there to go kill someone over there. So if you're saying that they are responsible enough to kill someone in Afghanistan, why aren't they responsible enough to hold the gun and defend themselves in their home country? If you're old enough to vote, you should be old enough to have the responsibility of your own defense, of defending your own country. And the thing is, all right, maybe you can stop the guns from getting into people's hands, but in order to do that, then you'd have to make sure no one has any guns. And here's the thing, maybe if no one has any guns, I don't mind that too bad. That may not be too bad. Let's all fist it out. All right. But then you go back to the founding of the United States, where they were founded based on we're all having our weapons just in case those in charge of us start to play mad. We can all say, listen, we aren't doing this anymore. So the prospect of taking all the weapons from everyone in the United States is not going to go over well. That's not how that country functions. And if you're being honest and looking at history, you could understand why that is. Because every single time that some authoritarian dictator tried to make a move in a country, one of the first things they did was seize all the weapons from the citizens. Now, not saying every time that weapons are taken that means some dictator is going to take over the country, not necessarily, but generally speaking, anytime a dictator is going to take over the country, that is something that they do for obvious reasons. Let's see, there seems to be some conversation over on Instagram there. I believe it is a combination of deep-rooted mental illnesses, the media turning them into superstars as a lot of them want fame, and lack of disincentivization such as armed guards. A lot of them want fame and attention before they go out as they never felt noticed in their lives. Furthermore, Iran Corp meta-analysis of nearly 28,000 gun studies found that 5% didn't even meet the threshold for a coincidental link between guns and violence. It also saw evidence for maximizing positive outcomes to anti-gun ideology, whereas the study suggested that undesirable outcomes were found from the perspective of the gun ideology. Undesirable outcomes were suppressed. All right, okay. So, by and large, studies have found that guns don't necessarily increase the violence. But that does make sense. If they ban guns, another weapon would become the problem. Yes, obviously. Because your problem isn't a weapon problem. Your problem is a students being violent problem. Yes, I'm looking different tonight. I took a sharp nap, you know. It happens on rare occasion. Reason Magazine did a video covering it. So that's why if you're over on YouTube, the name of my YouTube video today is Laws Don't Work. And that's the truth. The laws in themselves don't work. The laws work because of the society surrounding it. The laws work in a societal context. And if the society is disintegrating, if the strength that made the society whatever it was in the initial sense is now not, if the society is not at that point it once was, then the laws obviously aren't going to work for the society in its current state. And the solution that so many people seem to have always goes in the direction of let's pass a law to do it. Why doesn't the government stop it? And let's make sure that the government does this and the government does that and the government does that. And then some of those same people would point back and say that the government isn't good at doing anything. So if the government isn't good at doing anything, why do we want to leave everything up to the government? It does not really make sense. My hands are lethal weapons and I can use it at will. Well, good for you, Arman. All right. That's all I have for now, folks, over there on YouTube. It has been nice. And this is Friday, so I will see you again, not tomorrow, but on Monday for the next Mindful Live at 9:30. If you're over there on YouTube or on Instagram, I'll be on TikTok for a very short while after for the Afterlife short chat. Just saying goodbye pretty much over there on TikTok. I hope you are educated, informed, or entertained otherwise. Then I'll see you again for the next Mindful Live, as I said, next Monday.